Hey guys, Casal here. You're about to watch Thorin talk and talk and talk. But it's kind of good, I swear.
This is another one of my Patreon AMAs that I do each month, sometimes more than once a month. Anyone who donates $10 or more to my Patreon can submit a question. There'll be a thread in the description box below. And there's a channel on my Discord, which you can find the link for below also, where if you're in that tier and you link your Patreon account to your Discord, then, or the other way around rather, then you'll be able to go in that channel and potentially give questions. As usual, there are a billion questions, so I'm going to get through what I can, and I'm going to divide the other ones up, and I'm going to come back with another one. So, Vigar says, oh, by the way, there's also a Clips channel with all the shit on there. Vigar says, as a Norwegian, I'm excited by the prospect of Perkz gathering the top Norwegian talent in one team. Perkz, A-P-E-K-S, not the game Apex Legends. I especially hope they could acquire Rain and Razzaq in addition to Jacob. What do you think they, as a trio of stars, would accomplish if they were surrounded by a competent IGL and a fifth player? Right, the problem there is, you've just said it as though it was no big deal to just put a competent IGL and a fifth player. Like, who the fuck are those people in the Norwegian scene? Like, those are all good players. Like, what's great is, one of them's even sort of like, I mean, Rain and Jacob could both be entries, but like, I think Jacob doesn't even mind being sort of a lurk as well. He could do that. Could even see them being an interesting combo. Rain could play supportive, but in this team, you'd want him to be a star rifler. Razzaq's obviously an AWPer. I think he still has to prove himself. People are taking it for granted that he's already really good. He's only played a couple of online tournaments. The main thing is, who are they going to get as IGL? Like, the only person who's even vaguely done it is Rubino, and he has not been relevant for almost 4 years, and I have no idea what level he's at. And before people go, what about Croman? Like, Croman barely did anything. Like, he just did that one round at ESL Cologne, and it's a miracle that they won that fucking ELSL Belo Horizonte with him. Like, people mad overrated that guy. He was just an okay player that they made work, because guess what? Carrigan teams are just genius with any part team. They made fucking Exist work against Prime Australis guys. So, I personally would go this route. I know that like a lot of Norwegians and Danes can basically understand each other or speak Danish in theory. So, just get a Danish IGL and a Danish fifth. There's so much talent in that scene. So, like, speak Danish if you can. Again, I don't claim to be an expert. These are just things I've been told. So the obvious ones get MSL, have him in the team. He's already worked with technically none of these people, I guess, but I'm sure he's played with some of these people in pickups or whatever. Maybe get another Dane, get like Cajun B or fucking whoever you want as the support player, right? That's probably what I would do. Jack Charpentier says, or Charpentier, says, hey Thorin, my brother and I are both fans coming from different games. We wanted to thank you for your content. Do the rumours that LEC Wooloo post on Twitter have any legitimacy, or is he just spouting up bullshit? I don't think they're all bullshit. Like, I think a lot of them are real moves, and they're also oftentimes very preliminary. And I think basically that, like some of the clout chasers in CSGO, he just reveals whatever he hears. Like, he hears some stuff on Discords, people just leak stuff to him, people tell him a rumour that they heard that was a rumour, and then if he thinks it's sexy, he puts it out there. The problem is, it's not the same as vetting that a journalist does, and crucially, even some low-level journalists who are sort of in the clout chaser realm will also get info, and they'll be like, well, this is from the player himself or the team, and they don't realise they're being played. Like, you'll never play me in Richard Lewis. Like, we'll go and vet that independently for people you don't know we're talking to, so we'll know if you're full of shit. You won't catch us like you catch some of these people out there. So, some of it is, I would just say, treat it as if it isn't, but it's a funny idea to entertain. How about that? And wait for legit journalists to actually confirm it. Django Tango, given how underwhelming JDG, Jingdong Gaming, looked at Worlds, I think it was possible for Rogue to make it to quarters and that they had a very similar group to Fnatic 2019. Instead, Rogue finished fourth below a PCS team with roster issues. How have they escaped criticism for their very disappointing Worlds performance? I don't think there was any world that they were getting out of this group. I think the meta was shit for them in all regards. I think their top laner wasn't vaguely good enough, and they were playing against arguably the two best top laners in the world. I think the PCS team was just impossible to scout. You had no fucking clue. And at least they play aggro. They always are in with a chance. They remind me of the old Flash Wolves type teams. First of all, let's be real. Look at the expectations. 2 of them had ever been to Worlds. And that was years and years ago for both of them. 3 of them were rookies last year. So, okay, there you go. Their style didn't seem to last to Worlds. That like scaling style. Their best player is a guy who's going to play Azir, Orianna, etc. Like, you're just not going to be able to take over the game with that shit. And the 2 teams that were in their group, Damwon Gaming and Jingdong, were 2 of the top 3 favourites for the tournament. So I don't think they ever had a chance to get out personally. I also think anyone who's not a top 2 seed for a region, I actually would like it if everyone played in the play-ins, just so they got warmed up, they played a bunch of different teams, they scrimmed at a different level, then they leveled up. Like, I just feel like if you're taking rookies now, it's going to be hard to expect them to just burst onto the stage and be amazing. Even the Fnatic guys who were in Fnatic 2018, Fnatic 2017, they were shit in the bed. And they had fucking caps. Yamin Alam says, do you have a fair ranking for great Counter-Strike teams? In other words, what are teams in CS history that seem to always make their opponents scared to take duels, made their opponents choke, forced errors, etc.? For example, I thought the Dennis Fnatic lineup right after Pronax that won 6 tournaments in a row really made their opponents get nervous and make uncharacteristic mistakes. Right, the obvious ones that just wreck you and are terrifying is like NIP 2001, the one with Executor, SK Sweden 2003 with Element and Spawn, Fnatic 2009, Gux, Get Right and Forest. Like, these were ones that just blow you off the server. Their players are too good, unbeatable feeling. You don't think you can do anything against them. They front run the majority of the time and you're just fucking wrecked on all the maps. In terms of like making you make mistakes, like NaVi 2010 and MTW 2008 were teams where it just felt inevitable they would win. Even if you beat them today, you're probably not going to beat them 2 times out of 3. Virtus Pro is obviously one that was classic for making people shit their pants. Even NIP, sort of 2015, 2016, they would just find a way to stay in close games, and then better teams than them would just somehow inexplicably lose to them. In terms of teams that were just monster you sometimes, like Fnatic 2014 to 2015, the classic one that won a bunch of majors, Envy of the one, I think particularly the one with Shocks, they would just crack you upside the head, and a bunch of different players. They were so skilled. They could just go off in the game. It was so difficult. Their styles were very defined, but they were just so good at them. And their map pool were generally both very good across both, exceptionally good on certain maps. I think Fnatic 2016 at your tournament was mad over it. Like, I did a video about them once. I think it's more like, how did they get away with it? I also think they were playing a bunch of teams that hadn't been champions, like NaVi or Luminosity. And the problem is the Astralis team that was always their counter fell away at that time. So, and VP was starting to get shit and had a little mini slump. So I don't actually think they were that good. I'll also say an underrated one's got to be Team Liquid 2019. Like, when they were in their prime, winning all those series, they were just hitting you in the face with a sledgehammer and you were just fighting back. But if they were out shooting you, you didn't even feel like they were out braining you. There's nothing you could do in the server. So the big one says, you use the term elite not to describe an exact number of teams, but a class of teams which can contend for the biggest championships. Similarly, you use the term one of the greatest players of all time. The obvious parallel definition for this would be players who can challenge for the title best player of all time. Yeah, not quite. However, this one seems to be a bit more vague, although neither term refers to a specific number, top 5, top 10. Could you elaborate on how you decide when to use this term, similar to how you elaborated on your definition of superstar in your The Next Superstar video? So, okay, when I say one of the greatest players of all time, you don't have to be in contention for the greatest player. I would say one of the greatest players of all time is like, let's say you were like a top 5 greatest player in an era. Well, obviously the 5th best player isn't a contender for greatest player of all time, probably there. Oftentimes some of the gods are just too far out of touch. Like, for example, I would consider like Rui one of the greatest players of all time, but like borderline, like he was a very good player. He was a superstar player at times. He was every now and then he was maybe in contention for best in the world, but never quite made it. And then had years where even his bad years, he'd probably be a top 20 player. So it's more like their range just consistently keeps them up there. So I'd say just like with teams, how they become elite, you prove it again and again. In the biggest tournaments, majors, you're consistent. You can do it year after year after year, or many years. You can bounce back, and you have a trajectory. You go up, you keep going up, or it looks like you can keep going up. You've already hit, like, say, top 5 in the world, and you can maybe go a little bit higher. And then once you really show me you've got the all-around game, it isn't just your team, etc. All around in the sense that you've rounded out your game, not just that you have to be good in every area, obviously. I mean, you don't just have one strength only, and then you shit at something else, a bit like I think Xantares is. So, yeah, that's kind of like some of what I'm talking about there. Maybe I'll do a whole video on that. It's probably something that I could do that would be pretty interesting, because it sort of show my model, right? VatriSam says, following on from my previous question and your answer, I'm someone who very much enjoys the tactical side of soccer. I mean, it's barely existent, and yes, I have looked into it, but whatever. I would be very much interested in learning more about the NFL. Other than just watching games, what would you recommend to help start following NFL? I'm thinking such as classic games, content creators, or reading material to help understand the concepts and the tactical side of the game, or just the general history/storylines that will help me understand it further. Thanks. First of all, if you just want to get in on the most base level, watch the Undisputed show where like Skip Bayless and fucking Shannon Sharp just argue about it because it'll be fun. Storylines kind of like a talk show basically. And then a guy called Animosity basically says, Darius Butler is a former quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts, and he does a pretty good job of breaking down defensive schemes, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, basically, if you go to his Twitter, Darius J. Butler, he does like some little breakdowns there. What I would say is this. It's like following an esport. Start with some star players that appeal to you. So first of all, pick a quarterback. They control the game. Pick some stylish ones, pick some boring ones, so you get a sense of the game. So if you want stylish ones, Aaron Rodgers, still right now, Patrick Mahomes right now. If you want someone who's a bit boring, but he just gets it done and shows you how you can grind out the game in MSL, as it were. Drew Brees is an obvious example, except he's a bit injured. Tom Brady. Then pick a wide receiver. Basically, I would take, like, at the moment, you want exciting people. So take, like, DeAndre Hopkins, athleticism, speed, everything. If you want one that's, like, a sick route runner, which is a classic element of that, I'd go with, like, Devontae Adams of the Packers. Pick out a cornerback. The obvious examples for that would be, like, Richard Sherman. He's more of, like, a zone cover. I used to love Aqib Talib in terms of, like, a man-to-man. I think in the modern day, one of the few people who's a good man-to-man is, like, Jalen Ramsey of the Rams. These are people where, as you follow the wideouts, you're then going to notice who does a good job on them, and you're going to start to see what the one-on-one is in that regard. Then pick a defensive monster, typically edge rusher, so like Aaron Donald, Khalil Mack. These guys are fucking unbelievable. Like, he's wreck a whole game single-handedly. Watch highlights of these players, then watch them in games. As you say, watch classic games. There's a bunch online. You'll have to look where to find them. But if you want a channel that does shortened versions, so they're not all 3 hours long, there's an NFL throwback channel that has tons of classics, and they post them all the time. If you want specific games, and if you can find the whole ones, watch these. I'll just give you a handful. So if you want to see, like, the classic matchup of teams and quarterbacks from the 2000s, it's the Patriots and the Colts. So I would say probably the best game was the 2006 AFC Championship. That was, I mean, there's some great regular season games. I think it was like 2009 or something was a banger. I would say go watch that one. I won't spoil it, but the entire game's out there. It's just a completely insane game. If you want to see, like, I was a big fan of Peyton Manning, so I've watched a lot of his games. If you want to see, like, offense at its absolute peak, go watch the 2004 wildcard game between the Colts and the Chiefs, which, spoiler, it just goes absolutely mental in terms of one of the teams. And you'll see what quarterbacks are capable of. If you want a bunch of good Super Bowls, I think the Saints versus the Colts is one of the better ones with 2 really great quarterbacks, sort of in their primes, dueling. I thought it was just a great back and forth game. A classic one, because it's a massive upset, is the team that was supposed to win hands down was the Patriots in 2007, but them against the Giants. It's like the miracle underdog comeback versus the team that's supposed to win. Sort of like the Boston Major, Cloud9 against FaZe Clan. If you want just a really great action between 2 quality teams, at least sort of on the Packers side, like Packers-Steelers 2011 Super Bowl. The most recent Super Bowl, the Chiefs-49ers 2021, just has a very exciting storyline to it. And it was 2 of the best teams in the whole NFL, even though the quarterback aspect was a little bit mismatched. But then again, whatever, technically defensively, the 49ers were supposed to be better. I would say, if you can get ESPN Plus, watch the Peyton Manning's Detail series. Some amazing shit there where he breaks down, like, the quarterback reads. There's a channel on YouTube called The QB School with a guy who actually played in the NFL. He also breaks down shit. If you want just stories to get you into the human element, watch the NFL Films channel. There's a lot of great shit on there. Right, Spoonfed89. You made a video about NA leading leaders of men in CSGO a couple of years ago. Personally, it feels like apart from a few outliers such as Steel and PPD, this is a problem for NA esports in general. Do you believe there's truth to this, and do you have any idea where the region struggles to elevate these leaders/captains? This is something where maybe I should make a video at some point on my side channel, because it would mainly be more about people and culture and society and sort of what values have been lost. But it would tie into this, because I think that's actually, like, in that sense, like, sports, entertainment, also, it's downstream from culture, isn't it? So, in my opinion, the unit that makes any country, any region great and produces great men, which is what you need to hold everything together, is the family unit. And quite frankly, the family unit is almost entirely broken down in America. They have some fucked up simulacrum of a family is, with the whole, like, nuclear family, which itself destroys all the bonds of, like, having loads of brothers and sisters who help raise you and then help you socialize you. And then you have all aunts and uncles living with you and nearby you who teach you and play different roles in your life. Like, your uncle plays a different role to your father. And then you have this tribe element going on, whereas instead we're just these little units, and now it's all broken families. And now it's like kids who just grow up with fucking TV. So basically the family unit's been broken down and destroyed by a lot of outside factors, which we won't get into right now. I think it's basically what spiritually ails America right now. There's constant attacks on anything approaching tradition and ritual among certain cross sections of society. And so, yeah, I agree, it's missing in esports. But I think this is part of the reason why you're just not churning out a lot of like very strong leader type men. So I think people in esports, a lot of the young men, a lot of them are people who are rebelling against their dads or the lack of a dad or a mother that had to take a dad's role and authority figures in school and people being too harsh. As a result, they want to do their own thing. They don't want to listen. They don't want to be criticized like all the TSM people or you hear about the LCS players. So yeah, these are big issues. Like one thing you could do is interject people like me who have worked on these things to some degree. But another thing is like a classic quote, I think it's a Thomas Sowell quote, that like it's easier to like teach children or like mold children than it is to fix broken men. And I very much agree with that. So like some Jordan Peterson type shit could probably help a little bit. Peyton Lee Trahan says, hi Thorin, I just wanted to get your general opinion on NAF Fly as a player. By the way, it's technically NAF, like Fly was like a guy who was given a tribute to who died. NAF, given he is my favourite player, I wanted to know what you think. Right, I love his game, but I don't love his mentality. Like, I want to see his game with killer instinct attached. I think he could be a really god-tier passive player if he wanted to be. And his way to switch it up and go aggressive is so interesting to me. So the problem I have is he reminds me of Tracy McGrady, where the skill set's fucking really exciting. And when he's going off, he's one of the best players in the whole game. But the problem is they both had that thing to them of like, well, I had a good game, or I had a good game here, but in the final, maybe I did, maybe I didn't. Like, Tracy McGrady didn't have the teams that NAF did, but they don't have like that brutal drive to succeed, I don't feel like. I think his skill set is nuts, though. I think he is really, really good. And if I had him as a player, what I would try and do is I would get him and I would just explain to him that I need you to be responsible. I need you to be a 1A option for my team. And I would build around him heavily with an aggressive core star, could be anyone in that sense. And I would push him to be responsible and say, if you work with me, you've got to be responsible. And I would just try and make him like the best NA player. And I think he could do it. Girthy Moth says, from your past content, it would appear you're interested in music of a variety on your side channel where you break down art that you enjoy, particularly, you also put like Burial, Cinematic Orchestra, Oasis, etc. Particularly your videos on the Dune series and New Jazz. I was wondering if you could mention a few more bands/artists that you're currently listening to, or even just old favourites you can always go back to, and describe what it is you like about them. Cheers, Ben. Actually, did you have a name for that? It was Girthy Moth. Right, there's actually a playlist that a guy called Danroll made where he keeps updating it with all the music I like tweet out. So there's loads on there you can go and explore. But I'll just give out a few. What I'll try and do is I'll pick ones that I think people might not know as well or aren't super duper in the mainstream always. And I don't give a fuck about Reply, guys. We're going to argue about that. No one gives a fuck about you, mate. Great, get a gold star and fuck off down a mine somewhere. Right, so I'd pick out like a classic 70s band to me is the Moody Blues. They're just not as known as the others. Like great vibe, nice musicianship. They just have this sort of folk element to them that's so addictive. That's also really catchy stuff, really moving, really poignant, like very much of a time, but I love that era. I would say check out The Cure, but you're going to go, The Cure? I don't like pop shit. No, check out their Dark Trilogy. Those 3 albums go a totally different route and capture this darkness of the 80s aesthetic that's almost like proto-industrial or something like that. It's really interesting stuff. So they're very different from a lot of the pop stuff that you'll have heard in the charts. If you're not familiar with post-rock, I think you've got to check out a band called Explosions in the Sky. Just incredible shit. You'll have heard loads of their stuff as soundtracks for TV shows because it's really evocative, really taps into like deep emotional wells. A lot of it doesn't have lyrics actually, so that can in some senses get past being caught in the trap of the lyrics. As you say, there's a New Jazz video that's got a bunch of stuff that isn't Nujabes, but people might be interested like that. I would say a classic hip-hop group that I almost never see referenced has got to be Gangstar. If you don't know who DJ Premier is, one of the greatest like beats makers of all time. And in that band, he was doing some god-tier shit on their best albums. Like, unfucking believable. Like, there's some of that stuff from the 90s. Sounds so good, it could be a beat now that's straight fire. Scott K says, I'm always excited to learn new skills, a recent example being chess. However, I become bored/unmotivated after the initial bout of learning. Do you have any advice or experience with breaking this mindset of quitting once improvement requires more effort? Right, improvement always requires effort. It sounds to me like you just like novelty, or you like the idea of being into something. I'll tell you right now, one thing that will kill your work ethic, your job, the books you read, the art you consume is thinking that you want to be like that, or that's something that you would like as an idea in your mind, as a concept. I want to be into Bjork or classical music, or I'd love to know a lot about physics so people think I'm smart, or I'd like to watch art house movies so they think I'm cultured. Don't do that. Just go for what speaks to you. Find shit that's interesting and keep pulling on that thread so the whole thing unravels. So in this sense, if you were into chess, don't follow it as an abstract or try to learn level up the most boring way. Follow the stories of the great players. Find out who fucking, I can't remember half the names, like Tiger Petrosian and fucking Kasparov and Magnus Carlsen. Follow their stories first, then find out some of the classic games they played and learn some of the context of that, and then watch it so you can enjoy it. Like, go that way. Find your own way in. Like, it's like Joseph Campbell used to always mention about the Grail Knights. The logic is you go into the route, into the forest to find the Grail where it's darkest and no one else has cut it down. You find your route. You don't just follow someone else's path. I would say learn to enjoy delayed gratification in life, because it's basically the ultimate secret of becoming good at anything. Like, it's not that you have to enjoy it today. It's like, try it a little bit, see if you get good, and then see if it's addictive to get good. I would say find interesting speakers. A lot of what makes school boring is that the teachers just mail it in. They're made to do with a shit curriculum. They can't really freestyle much, and therefore the lectures are boring. If you watch like Krista Hitchens talk about politics, or Jordan Peterson talk about like society, personality, like fucking almost like text analysis, these people are fascinating. They're super interesting. They draw you in, and they don't necessarily, they can use complicated language, but they'll just bring you in with the ideas. Rudy 2K1, what were some CS goal lineups that you felt that they should have given the roster a longer chance to succeed? Right, here we go. I can reel off a bunch of these. Titan in early 2014 when they started shocks. Like, if Kaylee hadn't, I suspect, cheated against them, and the Team House shit hadn't have been for shocks at the time, and they hadn't have somehow blown that major where Smith's just fucked around when he's supposed to learn like Inferno against Hellraisers, that team could have won the major. They could have won back-to-back major. They could have done so much, and that team would have been incredible. They were already amazing. Cloud9 with FNS in 2018, I thought that they gave him long enough, and crucially, I think Tarek and people like that just lost faith in him, which is sad, but then again, if he doesn't have faith in himself, fuck him. Yeah, I've learned you just can't have unlimited faith in people like FNS and Daps if they don't believe in themselves. If they don't think they're good enough, how the fuck are they going to convince anyone else? Maybe ties into that leader thing earlier, right? I actually think MIBR 2018, when they had Yanko, if they had kept Yanko in the same lineup, they were in a pretty good spot at the end of that year, actually. Like, they were sort of peaking. They had a couple of tournaments that were pretty legit. I think if they actually listened to Yanko, he could have gotten them over the hump and maybe made them a champion. I don't know. They don't think they ever been even like a true top 3 team in the world, but they could have been like top 5 in a dark horse for titles. I think Nip with Makalele the first time going in 2015, I think it was so stupid that they kicked him. I know they did it for a culture fit, but they were just so dynamic with him. I would have loved to have seen what that summer would have been like with them in prime form, as well as your TSM, Fnatic, Virtus.pro, Envy. That 15 would have been the real dynamic one to make it all fucking exciting. I think FaZe with Carrigan, if they'd have brought in the right coach, could have rehabilitated him, could have been truly great again and really challenged Astralis later in the year. I think Ence with Alexi B is an obvious one. Just wasn't the right one to kick. Again, he could have gotten through the issues. I thought there's some quite petty childishness behind the scenes. Zeno Dwarf says, you have become enormously successful even though you make fairly niche content. I mean, esports is pretty large to be fair, but what were the key factors that enabled you to build an audience without going down the route of a score esports that makes clickbaity nonsense? I mean, to be fair, if the score esports didn't steal other people's content, they'd have fuck all themselves, especially if they were just the ones talking to webcam. Would you say it was just organic growth and persistence, or were there some strategies that helped? Any advice for new content creators is appreciated, not necessarily esports, and as always, thanks for the content. Right, I did it the hard way. Like, I actually thought in some areas I'd mastered it, but I actually learned years later. I just got super good at making the script, at talking to a camera, being interested, at tying together historical stuff with what's relevant now. But a lot of that, I was doing it the hard way. I was fucking ice skating uphill. Like, what you should do is look at the process in all different areas, and even the people who do clickbait. What is the process? What is the mechanism behind it as to why it works? And then just apply your values to it and don't be a piece of shit. So, I mean, you might see that next year. I've got some certain ideas along these lines. I kind of brute forced it and overworked myself because I was, like the guy before, I was trying to teach myself what hard work was, and I thought hard work was you just work yourself to death. I would say schedule your day, but be kind to yourself. I actually prefer like a quota style than like you must do this at these times. But what I'll say is this. Get the rest of your life in order. It'll make it all easier. Get your health in order, like vitamins, diet. Get your exercise. Just do walks each day. Then start doing like, I don't know, fucking boxing or weightlifting, whatever. Get your sleep in order. An hour or two before bed. Turn off electronic devices. Use a Kindle or use a book. Like, do a little bit of meditation. Schedule your pleasure, your free time. Make sure you have fun. Make sure you read a book. Make sure you watch a movie. Make sure you go out and spend time. But schedule your time off later in the day. So get your first work done early. Get your wins in early. Get the big thing done early. Make a list. Be very brutal with it. And then do the top thing. Then you can have the rest of the day off, or you can take time here, or you can come back to doing work and feel like you're not procrastinating because you scheduled that time. And then when you schedule time, do what you want to do. Don't procrastinate and watch endless, pointless YouTube videos. Watch a YouTube video you really want to watch. Watch a movie you want to watch. Read a book you want to watch. Invest in yourself. One mistake I made was I should years ago have hired people and given them like a percentage of the ad rev and had them help my channel and stuff and edit stuff and make thumbnails. Don't just only try and grind the plus minus and think I'll never invest anything. I'll get all I can. I did that because I came from a poor man's background. So I would say also, if you want some like advice on free tips on technique, follow some of the money Twitter people. Look at the people I retweet that give out free advice as value adds so that you keep following them for their courses that you don't have to buy. Although, by the way, if you want to get in those fields, just buy a cheap course. Check it out. I would say one thing, crucially, is remove as much fear porn and bullshit news and celebrity nonsense as you can and add in accounts that are like art and inspirational quotes and great music and jokes and make your life fun. Don't make it a fucking chore to go through that shit. Toxic, with a Y and a C, says, given that NaVi have two of the best players in the world for a fair while now, he's obviously referring to Simple Electronic, I think that Boomich has done an okay job so far. It seems a bit underwhelming given the time, resources, Blade, Simple Electronic he's been given. Do you think that they should be making a roster change, or do you think it's too early since there have been no LAN events for quite a while? Even without the LAN events, I actually think they probably should make a change. The problem is I don't know who they get, because there's not really anyone good. I don't think Boomich is that good myself. I think what they need is a real IGL. And the only person I can see in that region who has the potential for it feels like it's Jerry. Just, I think if you gave him better players, maybe he would play a little bit more tactical. But I feel like he does a decent enough job. Obviously, he's done some really stupid things recently, but whatever. I do think it's probably Flamey's time to go. I don't think he even serves his role that well anymore. Maybe bring in a Buster, someone like that. I think that's probably the route to go. I do think Blade is both a treasure and a fucking thorn in the side, because the problem is he's the ultimate guy where it's like the perfect is the enemy the good. I think sometimes he tries to go way too much for perfection, whereas I would like it if they sometimes just did some Forza shit and just do some simple 4-1, smash it, hit the site hard. You got the best players in the world, just make it work. You don't have to always try and slow it down. Like sometimes I think he doesn't always play the right pacing. Connor Raback says, when Corona finally ends and we get LANs and CSGO again, which top teams do you think will be better on LAN, and which teams do you think will have been the most inflated in terms of results / ranking by this online era? Right, the obvious ones in terms of the cores are Fnatic and Mouse Sports. They will almost certainly be quality teams. Maybe Mouse will only be top 10. We'll see what Kerrigan does. Fnatic, I feel like, could instantly be top 5 again. Evil Geniuses seems like an obvious one. They'll be monsters on LAN. I think Zeus actually can do so much for them and make them even better than they were last year. I think Vitality would just straight up win tournaments if they're on LAN. Look at some of the teams beating them in the finals. I think G2 will be even better, especially when equal. I think they'll be a very strong, like at least a super dark horse. I think the inflated teams are like heroic. The problem is too many of them are inexperienced. Too many of them are like number one options. I don't see enough supportive elements then and not a great enough IGL. So I think they'll just be like a top 10 team / top 15. Maybe a nice dark horse team. Furia, I think will be a really fun team to watch, but low end of the top 10. I think Chaos and Godsent type teams are the ones that benefited mainly from like region aspects, online qualifiers, just online play in general. I think those teams would be way worse when you actually put them onto LAN. Lager15 says, how bad do you think the current state of Swedish CS is? To me, it seems like soon is too much to have two good Swedish teams like Fnatic and NiP. It's pretty crap, I've got to say. Like, you've got a lot of like young talent, but no superstars in NiP. Nork maybe in the future. Plopsky can be pretty decent. Rez isn't a superstar anymore and doesn't play that role. Then you've got the nice coach with them. Then you go to Dig. I don't think they have the right coaching staff. Like, I think Vendetta can be an analyst, but they don't have a truly great coach. And I think they haven't got the... They've only really got Halzerk and he hasn't really proven himself. And I think Forrest is a bit washed now. I don't really think they've got much at all. Fnatic obviously have the really nice core and really good players, but why would they let anyone go? So the main problem is you need grassroots players. And obviously Fnatic's got Brolan. If you put Brolan on NiP, or another veteran and Brolan on NiP, maybe that's interesting. I think I'd probably make it worse than Fnatic, though, to be fair. I think they've lost their grassroots, so they're just not getting the superstars, and they don't have hundreds, so they don't have people to bring you up and tactically train you in the game. So a lot of the people I've seen recently just kind of a bit meh. The big one says, last year you named Zywoo as the most likely player in the world to become a superstar. I will say I did that after he'd already started bagging people's heads off. Has he become a superstar? And if so, when did he cross that threshold? Probably towards the end of the year. Like, I will say, he hasn't really done it at the majors, but he's only had 2 cracks, and one of them was before Alex was his IGL, so fair enough. I think just in terms of consistency, he was unbelievably consistent for a player that young and inexperienced. The eye test showed he's fucking unbelievably skilled and really nice, well-rounded game from the beginning. Did it in finals and semis of Tier 1 events. Like, yeah, he pretty much checked all the boxes except the majors so far. Also didn't have tons of help on his team, even though he did have a lot of help role-wise. Winter. What do you think about Dorpa's opinion on coaching? Actually, I'll go back. I'll get that in the next one. Asplaster 2000. What is your ranking of the best Western teams of all time for League of Legends? Right, obviously I could do a whole article or a piece. I'll do a quick one for this. Number 1 is clearly G2 Esports 2019. Just the ability to adapt to styles, play through any lanes, all the support elements of Fire, the mechanical skills of Fire. They had the mentality to even shit talk and challenge the Asian teams and put pressure on them. Would have been fitting if they'd somehow won Worlds. I think if IG beats FPX, which is definitely doable, I think actually that G2 would have beaten them in the final. I have Moscow 5 2012 second, just the best team in the world, incredibly innovative, just so difficult to figure out how to play against, used aggression in a way no one else really understood at the time, could always turn a team fight, like basically had like the Dota mentality of how to turn a fight and call targets. Number 3's got to be Fnatic 2018. Just a really solid team. I don't think quite at the level of Moscow 5, but still a very good team. Obviously, Caps was coming into his own. I think Brox is a bit of a weak spot, but it didn't matter much. I think we both sort of get hit in the face by the meta, and the bot lane was still very strong because it was pretty good around that time. For number 4, Fnatic 2015, they just understood like Korean-style macro. They understood the lane swaps. Yeah, not every player was super amazing, but they had pretty quality players generally. They just couldn't really have won the Worlds through top, I don't think, at that time. Korean top lane was too good. Number 5, CLGU 2012. It's just amazing at coming from behind, amazing at scaling, amazing mid laner, the best player in the world. Like, there's a load of factors going for them at that time. Pedro Rojas says, I don't know if you've seen the anime show Haikyuu! Exclamation mark, exclamation mark. I think I know the one he's referring to. But in that show, both of the main characters have complementary talents which make each other better than just the addition of 2 parts. Does this happen in CSGO? And if so, which 2 or more players have these qualities? I mean, the obvious one in terms of a total team was Virtus.pro's lineup. I actually never thought they were like the most skilled lineup at all. They weren't the most tactical lineup at all. They didn't have the best team player. They just had enough of everything and some sort of crazy like hive mind from playing together a long time that they were just like, it was like a Hydra. You just couldn't fully kill them, and they sort of had to just be straight up beaten. I would say in terms of individual players, the obvious one's Taco and Cold Zero. They seemed so complementary. They understood each other, different ends of the skill equation, but still good players in their roles. Simple and Electronic, I think, actually fuel each other because it's like, it's not just me hard carrying and we lose. It's like this guy might go off and they have such a different playing style. Simple, so aggressive. Electronic's a little bit more passive, but so insanely good whenever he gets into his comfort zone. I think MSL in any of his entries, MSL in AZ, MSL in fucking Kirby, MSL in Config, not MSL and Kirby the last few years when they were in Dignitas. Just look at how much better MSL made these guys. He made them look like some of the best riflers in the whole world. Crazy LEP4 or LEP4. You've mentioned that Shox is one of the few star players that could make a comeback as a top tier player. Is he close to achieving that now in Vitality? And who were the other players you think could become either a star in the T that you think could become a star? He fucked it up in the T1 scene again. I don't think he probably can. I mean, we are online. I think he is very much a LAN player. He's still unreal and clutches. So the skills are there. The problem is I don't think he has the same fire or even the same in and out motivation that he had before. All I'll say is this. I think maybe getting older and having a family life, I think it's one of those scenarios of it was love that killed the beast in the end. It was one of those, I think. In terms of people who could come back to being a star in the tier 1 scene again, I actually think Guardian, believe it or not. I think if he really is motivated and he gets a good team, I mean, you still see him in Pogs looking really good. So I feel like that's possible. Part of me just can't give up full hope that Get Right could do it one day, but I realise that probably has sailed, and also he's got his illness and stuff. Part of me still feels like Snacks should be able to. Here's the problem. I don't know about Snacks, actually, because I think he lost his feel for the game. I think maybe Bialy. I think if you put Bialy in a good international roster, his aim and his angles were just so bonkers that I almost feel like he could. I almost feel like he didn't even, I think, got that bad towards the end. So I think that's possible. Underwater Gypsy. Is Naguri the best top to come out of Korea, right? Well, it's a Korean top lane connoisseur. I should probably do content on that. So quick answer basically is no. The Shy is, just for his peaks. Smeb is for the whole career. Flame after that in terms of like the pioneer, individual, true top carry. Then Naguri. And Naguri has a chance in the next year to jump ahead of a few of these. But we've got to get some championships. We've got to keep playing at an elite level. We've got to be the best in the world, clearly. Problem is at Worlds, he actually sort of sacrificed all. It was a bit whack in that sense. But it was to win Worlds. Pronogo, what areas of esports content simultaneously have the most potential and the most lacking in pieces? Right, I think it's not really about that. It's more like developing your own shit and following your own curiosity. But I would say in general, it's the kind of breakdowns like a DL Plus. It's just that the people who do them are boneheaded or they don't understand the format. And basically, I'd have to sort of direct them. And, well, we'll just see. Maybe I'm going to do that in the future. Impulsive. Would you and Richard ever consider doing a podcast that isn't about esports? Yes, we actually tried to. We filmed a pilot for it. It was all about like Game of Thrones and movies and a little bit of politics and like general like internet culture. The problem is we filmed the pilot and it was initially greenlit by a certain site that I used to work for. Then they just abandoned it, threw it in the bin. Fair enough, they paid us for it. But as a result, I found that quite disappointing. So maybe in the future, if I have some other projects going on, it's something I would explore. DeJuris says, which Valve-banned EU CSGO player is the greatest loss to the CS scene? Please consider both cheating, Dreamer, Kaylee, Yampy, although Yampy technically didn't cheat, as Valve just confirmed in Richard's video, and match fixing, like Foxio, bans. Right, Yampy's the obvious one in terms of potential. He just looks so fabulous. Like, you could really see him being a sick player. Kaylee is hard to talk about because he looked good in the server, but I personally think he probably cheated online in some of those games. Foxio, I don't know if he had the mindset for it. He did. I don't like to say toxic, but he seemed very difficult to work with, and he wasn't quite good enough to make it worth it. A weird one I'll throw at you is maybe Baby Bear, who was playing in Overwatch and is playing in Valorant now, because apparently he was like VAC banned, but he looks like a pretty good hit scan player overall. Shikaz says, how do you decide which players to make Who Is Player X videos about? I always enjoyed those videos for providing historical context for current players and coaches, especially those coming from CS 1.6, as I didn't play or follow Counter-Strike until 2014. Do you think enough time has passed and new viewers are coming to CSGO to make that sort of content for the new generation of players? They probably have. You should probably do content like every couple of years like that. I don't really do them anymore because they were very basic and I was still sort of working on my craft back then. I don't know how to put in enough time on them. They also ended up having an overlap with other content. Like if I get a really in-depth one, it just becomes its own video, not really in that series, right? So it's certainly something I would consider. And one thing I will certainly consider is like any coaches that had history in past games. I thought I might actually do some for those guys. That would make more sense. And as you say, maybe now introduce people to who these guys were at the beginning of CSGO. Kiri157 says, what skills do you think CS players could learn from LoL players and vice versa? For example, I think LoL pros subscribe to meta thinking too much and could learn from Dota pros using the champion pool / draft as a toolbox. Right? I actually think the problem is in League of Legends, the game didn't really allow you to do that much. There was just too many like obvious, like here's a hammer to smash them in the head, not like here's all the different tools. But I agree, now it is, for the last couple of years, it's actually the thing I love the most about Dota, the fact that if you're a really great drafter, you can flex stuff everywhere, you can bait people, you can even make use of champions that weren't heroes that weren't as good in the game and find ways to come back in the game through different styles. I think CS players generally understand being the star player more. I think League of Legends players are more brainwashed by role. So sometimes even the jungler and the support just play like bitch champions in a way where it's like, but that's just the meta right now. It's but you're the best player on the team. Like if Fnatic had tried to make Selfless be like subservient to the rest of them, I think they never would have done anything they did this year. Whereas I think CS players know who the star is because you can just see the aim. I think League of Legends, though, get the carry balance better. Like they don't tend to try and just make super teams. Whereas in CS, they'll do that all the time. Look at teams like Team Liquid, EG, FaZe Clan, Mouse. Like these teams try to just stack skill, and then you hope you've got a good IGL that can figure things out after that. Uni says, could you briefly go over your thoughts on Kenny S's downward trend of no longer being a spotlight player? It's hardly ever now I hear casters or analysts mention Kenny S when G2 plays. To be fair, the online era hasn't been that kind to him after the first few months, like from the summer onwards. The problem with Kenny is his playing style is super intense, but you want that from him because if he's on, it's going to make him one of the best AWPers in the world. He can't just be an average AWPer. There's almost no point having him. He also, quite frankly, hasn't had a great IGL in many years now. Existence tried to do it, but obviously didn't get much time with the project and he didn't have the mindset for it anymore. So put him with a really great IGL, then let's talk. Like, I'd love to see him with Alex, actually, and see what Alex would do. Zoomba says, if Perkz would leave G2, obviously this was a while ago, and join Fnatic, which team is better now? Obviously, I don't know who joins as ADC in that scenario, so let's assume you're saying upset, right? Because if Fnatic stays with the same with Perkz mid, that is a fucking banging team. I would just say this, why is it? Like, Perkz would be really good, but I don't get the premise of why they're a fucking bang. See, I'd still say they'd be worse than G2. Like, to me, I think you're probably high on the World's quarterfinals that they lost. Remember, didn't win. And against a team that now people say wasn't even the best. So I don't think that is as good as you think. Like, I still think you could have issues with Bwipo, and I think you could have issues with Hylissang, and I think there could still be like misunderstandings of how to use top. And I don't think they had the right head coach. I think he should have been the strategic coach. So I still think there was many more things to fix before they were like going to really be the number one EU team. I just liked it in terms of the fact it would have been Perkz against Caps. And that would have been the cool angle. Right, we'll just leave it there for now. I've got a bunch more. Obviously, there'll be a thread in the description box below where people can submit more questions. And I'll be back sooner rather than later to get the next one done and keep moving on with the AMA. So check out the Patreon. This video was kindly supported by Pronogo, Mohammed, Alabdul, Razzaq, Dean Tanglis, James Pederson, VatriSam, ErikHillestad, Andreas Kroknes, Hades, Zoomba Gaming, JDubs, Tobias Bernasconi, and Alexander Rao. Special thanks, as always, goes out to Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for one of my upcoming episodes? Maybe you want to ask more of those questions in that video AMA I do each month. Do you want teasers? Find out who the next guests are for my shows. Well, maybe you even want to take part in one of those crazy donated discussions where we go all over the place. If any of these perks appeal to you, or you want to support the channel, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrolluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.